infinite complacence, people went to and fro the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Thanks for having me on the show. I really, really enjoy it, and I'm excited to share this with you. So this happened back in, it was either 92, 93, 94, in that general region of time. And I had moved, I live in Iowa right now because my parents split up when I was young. And my mom met a fellow from Iowa, and I moved out there with her. But in high school, I moved back to upstate New York. And the town that I moved to is called Alexandria Bay. And it's the heart of the Thousand Islands. If you've ever heard of Thousand Islands dressing, that's, the recipe comes from that region. And it's like a touristy area where in the summertime, the population just explodes because the area is absolutely gorgeous. It's unlike probably anything you've ever seen. If you ever have a spare 30 seconds, Google it sometime, Thousand Islands. Alexandria Bay is called the heart of it because it's kind of right in the middle of what's called Millionaires Row, and is where in the early 1900s, a bunch of very well-off folks basically built these beautiful, like multi-million-dollar mansions on islands. And it continues to this day. It doesn't have the same popularity as it did way back then, but it is a very popular summer spot, especially for Canadians, because it's right on the Canadian border. The St. Lawrence River is the Canadian border between upstate New York and Canada. In fact, a lot of my friends and I, we've swam to Canada, we've walked across the ice to Canada, or taken snowmobiles and four-wheelers. It was one of those things where, you know, you can imagine being a teenager, and the drinking age on the Canadian side was 19. We found our ways to kind of get over there and have some fun.
It's a good idea at the time, right? I mean, I suppose you're not supposed to swim to Canada, but it's fun.
Yeah. And it was, you know, I kind of underappreciated it, going from living in that, you know, kind of beauty to, you know, living all over the country. I never really appreciated it for what it was. And I would compare the area that we lived to as like a popular summer spot where a lot of people would come in the summer. And so the population of the town that I'm from, Alexandria Bay, dips down to around 1,000 people in the wintertime, but it explodes to above like 10, 15,000 in the summertime. And I tell you all this because it's a very, if you were to look at it, it's a lot of nature. And it's just gorgeous up there. And where my story starts is after I moved back to Alexandria Bay. My family, the Slates, have some land on the riverfront. And what they've done with that land is they've developed it and basically set up like a summer park for people to come and be able to spend their summers on the river. And it's a little bit outside town. It's about a mile and a half outside town. But to get to that area, there's a road, and it's called Carnegie Bay Road. And on one side is straight woods and timber, no developments whatsoever. And on the other side is the riverside, and most of the development was far off the road. And so, and keep in mind, this road was not paved until I was a kid. And so it's one of those drive into your lakefront or your riverfront property kind of road where it's, you know, it's kind of quiet. And at night, extremely dark, like no street lights, zero. And so I started playing sports. I started hanging out with friends and having girlfriends. And so there were a lot of nights where I'd have to walk that road alone. And the first couple times I walked it, it was like no big deal. And I never noticed anything. But then the more I walked it, I started noticing something where it sounded like somebody or something was walking in the timber to my right, which is the timber where there's no development. There's no houses. There's no nothing. It's all woods. And I'd hear it. And so inevitably I would stop. And then 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't hear anything else. And so I knew it was just me freaking out because of the echo or whatever kind of audio weirdness was going on. I didn't really think of anything. In fact, it's funny, as I tell this story, I kind of had a ranking system of my walks home after they started getting a little stressful. And it was kind of funny. 0 and 1 were, moonlight versus no moonlight, but no sounds. There's nothing to worry about for a 0 or a 1. For a 1 or a 2, it's either moonlight with sounds or no moonlight with sounds. And it kind of gets worse, because if there's no moonlight and there's sounds, you're kind of freaking out a little. And then 4 and 5 were, major sounds. What I'm about to tell you was off the charts, like way above 5. Because what would happen if the sounds were going on and I stopped and then I still heard the sound, the twigs snapping, the footsteps, if I still heard it, that was at the point where, and this is kind of I don't know if this is like a coping mechanism or just me being weird, but my defense mechanism was to start singing out loud. I'm sorry it's so weird, and I would pick songs that were upbeat in nature that I knew all the words to, like Billy Joel or the Beach Boys, or, and it was basically trying to force lightness into the situation. And that worked a lot. And so I would either forget about the sounds that were going on, or they would stop, or both. Inevitably, I would make it to the bottom of the Carnegie Bay Road and be okay. Now, every once in a while, if I would start singing, I would hear the noises like increase. And that is when hopefully I wore sneakers that day, because I'm going to run. And run, I mean jog. And it's kind of one of those deals, well, okay, the noise a little too much, I'm not dealing with this, and I would jog. And I would jog to the end of because Carnegie Bay Road opens up at the end and kind of forks out, and the timber is gone. And so when you get to the bottom of Carnegie Bay Road, I called it the bottom, it opens up wide. And I'd get there, and it was kind of like I just ran a marathon, and I'd be, had my arms up in the air, and I'd look around, and there'd be nothing there. And that happened all the time. I would say the amount of time that I heard noises on my walk home was probably 20 to 30% of the time. Most of the time I didn't hear anything. Where this all came about, I think I was coming home from my girlfriend's house, and it was later than normal. I think it was like a Friday night or a Saturday night. And so it was very dark, no moonlight, and I'm walking along, and the noises start. And what the noise sounds like, it just sounds like there's somebody in the brush next to me that is struggling as they're walking, keeping pace with me. And it's loud this night. And I'm like, wow. And so I think I started singing, Billy Joel or something, like, I don't remember what song it was, and that did nothing. And the sounds not only increased, but it felt like they were closer than normal. And it was just like, crashing and banging, snapping of twigs and stuff like that. And so I remember I was like, okay. And I just stopped singing, and I just picked up my feet and started jogging. It's going to be one of those nights, fine. And I just started jogging. Well, this night was so much different, because whatever was parallel with me in those woods was going crazy. It sounded like a Tasmanian devil or something, just going crazy next to me. And not only keeping pace with me, but as I'm jogging, I see a stick, I don't know, about 2 feet long, I think. Not a big stick, just thin. And it comes flying out of the woods and lands probably, I don't know, a foot in front of me. And then another one lands about 2-3 feet behind me. I realized that whatever is in there is throwing like debris. And that's when the jog became a sprint. I was flying, and it was, it's one of those deals where you hear fight or flight. And then if you've ever actually been in flight mode, wow, it's like I was flying, and I don't even know if I was breathing. I was running so fast. I was just trying to get to the point of Carnegie Bay Road where it opens up and there's no more timber. But the whole jog, and it didn't take very long to get to that point, but the amount of sounds and, those sticks combined with it had me to the point where I was, completely and totally freaked out, to the point where when I did make it to the area of Carnegie Bay Road where it forks off and the woods clear out and there are no more, I kept running. I did not stop. I did not turn around. I kept sprinting all the way to my house. And when I got to the house, I threw open the door, slammed it, locked it. And then I remember I was dying, of course, because I was, out of breath, but I was also air punching, like, oh my God, I lived, thank God. And I was just standing in the kitchen there right in front of the front door. And I was catching my breath and just kind of, trying to get a little less stressed out at the time, when a huge bang occurred on our front door. I mean, it was wham. And if you've ever heard the term locked up, that's what happened to me. Like, there was nowhere to fly, so fight or flight. And I'm ashamed to say I wasn't ready to fight because I could not move. I was standing there locked up, like every limb on my body was not able to move. My hands were straight down to my sides. I just remember this so clearly because I remember hot tears. I wasn't crying, but they were sure coming out of my eyes and just kind of flowing down. And I couldn't move. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. And I was just standing there, like not knowing what to do. It's late. My parents are in bed. And I think it was about 10 to 15 seconds later when another bang occurred, and it was kind of halfway around the house. And I stood there still not moving, not knowing what to do, praying that my parents heard it. And then 10 to 15 seconds later, another bang, and this one is kind of around the house now. And it's like 10 to 15 seconds. It's going, whatever it is going around the house and smacking it. It gets back around to the front door, and I'm still locked up. I'm still just standing there, completely locked up. And it bangs the front door again, and then there's nothing. And I think I had silence for maybe a minute and a half, long enough to realize I don't think it was banging on the house anymore. And I was finally able to sprint to my parents' room and throw on the light. And, how in God's name did you not wake up? It was one of those deals where, I feel kind of bad for them now because I come running in crying, screaming,
Right.
freaked out. But for whatever reason, they didn't hear it. My dad gets up. I tell him what happens. And he's kind of laughing about it, gets a flashlight out, and I'm not going outside. There's no way. He goes outside and he's looking for footprints and stuff, and never found any. There was nothing to see. Of course, around the house was landscaping rocks and stuff like that, so there wasn't really a lot of place where you would see it, I guess. But and so that was the incident. And I can share with you a little bit more about that area, but let me pause for a second and make sure you don't have any, because I was kind of rambling there for a little while.
No, that was perfect. That was not rambling at all. That was perfect. Very cool encounter. Terrifying though. I didn't know about I didn't know any of it, but the house banging thing was a big surprise for me. Holy cow. Especially since it right where you went in, and that's where it started, and then that's where it ended its little tour around the house. That's interesting.
Yeah, and so when I first moved back to New York, I remember that the first time that I walked home and experienced some noises like that, I was at a family gathering with my dad, my grandparents, and his two brothers, my dad's two brothers, my uncles. And I remember the four of us were just sitting there, and I said, guys, I'm walking home at night and there's some weird noises going on. And they all burst out laughing, all three of them. And I thought for sure that I was getting a joke played on me. And they're like, no. No, that's happened to all of us, Jeremy. Like, I think it was my Uncle John was saying, that's something that's bugged all of us. Even Grandpa has had it happen to him. And it's one of those things about, that patch of forest where we've always kind of half joking, half serious said it's haunted or there's something in there, And then my dad said, well, do you remember what happened to me? And then my dad shared this story of when he was my age, at the time, when he was a teenager. And a friend of his and him and their two girlfriends were swimming in the river. And they decided to walk into town that night. And so they're walking up Carnegie Bay Road, and a car is coming towards them. And in the headlights of the car, they see this gigantic outline of what my dad described as, if it wasn't Bigfoot or Sasquatch, I'm not exactly sure what it could have been. Now, they could only see the black outline of the thing. The gentleman that was driving the car drove up after the thing just scattered and went back into the woods. And the gentleman that was driving the car drove up, rolled down his window, and my dad, his buddy, and the girl, they asked him, what did you see? What did you see? And he was they said he was white and was only like, did you see that? Like, he wasn't able to tell them what he saw. He just wanted to know that somebody else saw what he saw. And he was, English was his second language. And so it was one of those deals where he went on his merry way, and so did they. But that was a definitive visual encounter. And then my two uncles said they basically said they couldn't count how many times that they heard crazy noises kind of walking next to them, in those woods on the way home. Nothing like crazy like what happened to me or my dad for that matter. But they did have a lot of experiences with those crazy sounds.
You were just the lucky one. They were just really pissed off at you. Maybe they didn't like your singing. I know. I was thinking. I would take that real personal.
Or my choice of music was just not their style. They really wanted some Led Zeppelin or something.
Exactly. They're like, you're not going to get us some Metallica here? Like, well, what's going on here,
Billy
Jeremy?
Joel and the Beach Boys. All right.
So, okay, I do have a lot of questions, actually. This is pretty cool. If you were to walk, if you're on Carnegie Bay Road and you're heading back home, and off to your right, there's the swath of forest. If you were to head into that forest, how far can you go kind of, and this is tough to say probably, but, in a diameter, in a circle where there's nothing? Like, if you head that way, is it quite wild for a ways?
I would say that nearest to the road, the brush is thicker than if you go into the woods themselves, if that makes sense. Because I used to actually play in those woods when I was a kid. I would, grab my toy weapons and go out there and just play in the woods. And so it's not as thick. It's not that thick once you get into the woods, but at the very edge of where the road and the woods meet is where it kind of got thick, because it had more than just woods. It had, weeds and, stuff like that. So definitely not thick woods. And it was enough to make a lot of noise, but it was definitely not the type of woods where you can't barely move. You can definitely walk around back there. And my friends and I used to camp back there too. We used to go camping quite a bit back there.
So that's cool. So besides that initial kind of undergrowth and all the thick stuff, it was perfect for whatever that was, because it could see you, watch you, interact with you while you were right there on the road and not be seen.
Yeah, I would definitely say that it was that the woods back there are easy enough to navigate. I used to walk for miles back there and just, explore and have fun.
And you had already heard your dad's story. Obviously, it sounds like the land had been in your family for a long time, and your uncles had experiences, and everybody had. I like the fact that they even said, well, it had rumored, been haunted or whatever that noise was, right? I mean, how else are you going to label it? It's either an animal or it's haunted, right? So,
right.
So you had already heard about Bigfoot before you had this kind of scale system for your walks, and then ultimately had this encounter, right?
Yeah. In fact, as a kid, 8, 9 years old, I started reading books like The Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, ghosts, UFOs. I've always been semi-interested in that stuff. It's always been just something of a fascination, not really a fear, just more of a fascination, curious about the unknown.
And the whole, it's paralleling you, and you're at a pretty good jog, right? Once you set in, you're not stopping because you're pretty scared at that point. And then the stick one comes out, and then stick 2 comes out, and they're pretty accurate from the sounds of it. To me, it could have obviously already picked, if we're assuming Bigfoot, it could have already picked these sticks up, right? One in each hand, or a few, whatever. And then it's obviously still paralleling you, and you could hear that, right? Like, it was pretty much keeping exact pace with you to the side.
Yeah, the scariest part was the noise. Like, the sticks coming out were like the cherry on the cake of it. I bet it was the frantic, heavy noise that was so different this time. Like, it was 10 times louder than it's ever been. And it sounded like it was tearing stuff up like a Tasmanian devil.
Mm. Yeah, and then it's able to do that and also be very accurate with 2 different sticks that come flying out at you while you're both running or jogging.
Yeah, and it might have been 3. I don't remember the exact details, but it was 2 or 3.
Okay.
And
yeah,
it was crazy.
Now, you said that you guys have gone camping in there as kids. Was there any, I'm sure you would have shared it, but looking back, was there anything weird while you guys would actually spend the night in those woods?
No, other than consuming Mad Dog 2020. I think that was the weirdest part of the night, because that stuff is absolute poison.
Yeah.
But no, we never experienced anything. But, as teenagers camping, what we're up to, just, joking around, screwing around, being loud, being silly. And so, no, we never did.
Any smells at any point in any of the wax, no matter the scale point that it got?
No, I do not recall any smell whatsoever at any point, at any time.
How about any other signs of, tree breaks, which are not always my favorite thing in the world anyway, especially when there's basically any people in proximity. But any sign like that, any of the classic Bigfoot sign?
That's a great question. I will tell you this. When I walked into town the next day, I was looking hard. And I remember I saw one of the sticks that had gotten thrown, and I looked at it, I picked it up, and I smelled it. And I remember just thinking, man, and I'm looking at the side of the road that the thing was on, and looking at the brush that, like I was just describing, that was in between the edge of the road and then where the woods kind of begin, and how thick it was. And I'm like, how am I supposed to tell if anything went on here? Because it just, even if something went ripping through that, I'm not sure if it would even register or look any different than it does right now.
Right.
And that was a frustrating thing for me, because I wanted, of course you want the proof, but there just wasn't any there.
Well, and that's what's tough when we start to talk about the substrate, and you already covered that, which was a question of mine as far as when it got to the house, what did it leave behind? And you're like, nah, there was nothing that it could have, because we've got all these these rocks and things, and that becomes very difficult. And even in the woods, it's the same thing. You know, you've got like some people are lucky enough to get, I think Cliff Barrickman has a couple different interesting casts, like knees and knuckles and even like butt prints, right, of possible Sasquatch and or glutes. Sorry, everybody. I shouldn't say butt, right? Unless it's the perfect conditions for that, you're likely not going to find anything.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember my dad showing me the next morning when I went outside. He's like, maybe this, and he was kind of like pointing at this one place in the rocks where you could see that a portion of them were lower. It could have been a footstep, you know what I mean? But it wasn't anything that you could be like, hey, check out this proof.
Right. Yeah, when you see like a slide up a berm or something, and you're kind of going, well, could have been a person, could have been so many different things. Very difficult to answer this, but I mean, how far in the woods do you think that guy was? Again, assuming Bigfoot. I mean, it's very difficult to answer this, but what do you think?
Gosh, not far. Not far at all. It may have been in that thick brush itself. I mean, it was, and that was the rough thing about that road, because there were no streetlights. I'm not exaggerating when I say that there were nights, and this was one of those nights, where you could hold your hand out and you would have difficulty seeing your hand in front of your face. But there was like, I'll never forget, I called them like the oasis, because there was like one or two houses that are close to the road, and they do have outdoor lights. And I remember, you know, once I would get to one of those, I would feel safe for like 10 seconds and then plunge back into the darkness again. But that's how dark it was. It was really dark. And I would estimate, based on the sound and based on the carnage that I was hearing, that it wasn't very far. It couldn't have been very far into the woods. It had to be very near me.
Yeah, it seems like it's a good thing you knew that road pretty well, since that night, no moon, and you're jogging, and you should probably be walking so you don't fall on your face. But at that point, you're going, I'm out of here.
It didn't happen that night, but it did happen on a different night when it was super dark and I got scared and I started jogging. Because it was so dark, you know how the pavement sometimes is a little bit above like the edge of the shoulder of the road? My ankle caught that on a jog, and of course I went tumbling, and so that was definitely a danger to be had.
Because you're going up the road to go out into town. You said it was about a mile or something, right? Something around there. To go in and hang out.
The opposite. I was going towards Carnegie Bay Road.
Oh no, I just mean if you are going out to, you know, hang out, you're walking up that road, probably maybe when it's still light out, depending on, you know, it is summer, so it'd be longer days.
Yep.
And it would be cumbersome to do this, but when you started to hear these weird noises, you didn't go, well, maybe I'll just put a little flashlight in my back pocket so that I can use a flashlight on the way home, you know, when it actually is dark? Or did you kind of go, I don't want to see what it is anyway?
I legitimately forgot my keys at my house probably 4 or 5 days in a row at one point. When I was a teenager, there was not a lot of pre-planning of anything. I was not responsible. I was not thinking about, you know, how I was going to get home, because sometimes I'd catch a ride home. But looking back on it now, you're right. I should have tried to pocket a flashlight or something. And this was before the days of cell phones.
Right.
And so, but a lot of times I would even leave my book bag at a friend's house and my bike, because I never rode my bike at night because that was just almost impossible to do. And so I would leave my bike and sometimes my book bag at my buddy's house. And then the next morning on the way to school, I would just grab both.
Cool encounter though. But not when you're completely by yourself and no one is around and it's totally dark. And then it follows you home and says hello a few times.
So after this happened, my dad decided to open up to me about something that happened to him, not on Carnegie Bay Road. Apparently in the 70s, the Adirondacks. There's a state park in upstate New York. It's very large. But there's also a bunch of private land that they opened up for people to vacation on, canoe, fish, camp. May have even opened it up to hunting. I don't remember. But him and his friend, they were in their early 20s. And they decided to take advantage of it. And they were thinking, hey, this land is probably hasn't been seen by anybody in a very long time. Let's see if we can find some trout. And so they went fly fishing, and they went like deep camping fly fishing, where they brought their canoe with them and their tent, gear, stuff like that. And they were 2 or 3 days into their excursion, and they pulled up and made camp, and were sitting around the fire. And my dad said that it started by hearing something circling the edge of where the light ended. They would hear footsteps and twig snapping and stuff like that around the edge. And then stones and sticks started getting thrown at them. They got so scared, and they're in the middle of nowhere. They don't have anything. But my dad said they got so scared that they would take turns feeding the fire, keeping the fire just ripping. And then whoever was feeding the fire would then run back to where they were both hiding, which was not in the tent. It was under their canoe. That's how scared they were.
Oh, gosh.
Because these stones and these sticks, I think even my dad's friend got hit by 1 or 2 of them. And they were just so scared that they both went, under the canoe until morning. And then they would take turns running out of the canoe to feed the fire and keep it going.
Jeez. See, that's the kind of situation that creates some serious PTSD for some, I would imagine. Yikes. Hiding under the canoe all night like that?
Yeah, I'm like, geez, Dad, why didn't you tell me that before I walk home, 100 nights in a row?
You're like, I even came up with a point scale system to say, adjust the danger to see if I needed to run. You could have shared this. All right, so that's actually...
Yeah, it was...
So he's got this canoe situation. Sorry. He's got the canoe situation in his 20s. And then he goes to this place where you guys own this beautiful land, and actually then sees one, the outline. He's probably going, oh, this again. Oh, there you are. I know you. Did they say, you said gigantic, but did you ever hear kind of an estimation of height or anything like that for the one that was in the car headlights?
Yeah, my dad said, when I asked him about it, he said, it was hard to tell because of everything that, but he said it was at least 6 foot tall, and it was probably much taller, but it was one of those things where he could guesstimate it, but he was thinking between 6 and 8 feet tall.
Mm. The guy that was very stupefied by the whole thing was kind of stammering about it. Did he talk about it much after that, or was that pretty traumatizing for him?
Never saw him again. Don't even know if that person was on the right road. Maybe they could have been lost. My dad didn't know who that person was,
Gotcha.
And never saw them again.
Yeah, he was down the wrong road, all right. He probably really wishes had taken the right one on that night. Yeah, the Adirondacks.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you first.
Yeah, I was actually about to say that in the little bit of research that I've done, I haven't done a lot, but the Adirondacks seem to be a real hot spot, and I think it's true. Like I know my dad does, and based on my audio experience, I mean, I don't know how it can't be true, to be honest with you.
That was pretty much literally what I was about to say. That's pretty cool. The Adirondacks, if people have not had the opportunity to even just drive next to it when you're on, I don't know what highway that would be, but it goes on and on and on, and you're looking over and you're like, this can't be the Adirondacks, and you open your phone map, and it sure as heck fire still is the Adirondacks, and you're like, we've been driving for, I don't know, 2 hours. It's crazy how large that swath of land is.
Yeah, it's huge. I think the old legend of Rip Van Winkle may have taken place in the Adirondacks.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel lucky to have had that experience, or is it just kind of like, it was cool, but I mean, I don't know how much that actually terrified you. You were being stalked, and then ultimately it came up to the house, whatever it was.
So I've been through some traumatic events in this life, and there's this lovely thing called compartmentalization. And for the longest time, it was one of those deals, because I wasn't really able to talk about it with anybody. I just kind of, pushed that down and like set that aside. Let's just pretend that one never happened. This other stuff I'm dealing with, all right, we'll deal with that, but that one's a little too wild and crazy to think about. And it's only been within the last probably, 5-6 years that I've spent some time really, really thinking, well, maybe I should think some more about this. And with the amount of acceptance and just change in the way that people are viewing these types of things, and the amount of openness and acceptance that is being seen, I just kind of felt like it was time that, I shared the truth. Now, as scared as I got, I'll say this, I definitely had that flight response because I was flying. But the fight response is where I really locked up. That's where I failed miserably. And that's how I was so scared that there wasn't even an option for me to do anything other than stand there locked up, not able to move. Couldn't do anything. Every muscle in my body was flexed. And I'm serious when I say hot tears were like coming out of my tear ducts, and I wasn't even crying. It was just that they were just inadvertently flowing, and I couldn't do anything. It was definitely the most scared that I've ever been in my entire life. It was one of those deals where I thought that there was a legitimate chance that whatever was on the other side of that door was going to come in and, do some very bad things.
Yeah, and this question would apply to the running portion because you certainly are, once you're in your house, that's a boundary that should not be crossed in any way, shape, or form, even by another person. So this more would apply to the running situation. Do you kind of wish in any way, shape, or form that you would have seen it, or seen a hand, or seen a head, or anything? No, not at all.
Oh, I think when you mention, you bring up PTSD, and there's definitely no way that I'm going to, compare anything that I've been through to that, because I love our I love our officers, and that's just not our soldiers, I should say. And, I want to make sure that they get the respect that they deserve. I had a very, 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 very scary encounter. I'm going to get off the PTSD thing and just say that for me, it was scarring in that I definitely wasn't as comfortable walking home at night. That's for sure. And camping ever since then, I have always considered to be a lot riskier, to the point where I almost want to bring a firearm with me to make sure that we're safe. But, it's, for me, seeing it would have been, I think that's when we would be talking about PTSD. If I would have saw it, I really, really think that I would be very, very, I think that it would have been a major game changer. I mean, this was a game changer, but if I would have saw it, I can't even imagine what I would have done and how I would have reacted.
Right. Yeah, because for you, this was enough and besides the stories you had already heard from your father and your uncle's experiences, this for you was enough of a confirmation to go, yeah, there are things out there. They're a lot bigger than us. They're faster, stronger. And so that has stuck with you your entire life.
Oh, yeah. In fact, since then, I've watched your show, and I listen to podcasts. I listen to Monsters Among Us and a little bit of Jim Harold, and then your podcast. And something that rings true to me, at least in my own mind, and I'm not trying to change anybody's mind here when I mention what I'm about to say, but it's like I find it our current existence is looking at Bigfoot or Sasquatch as if there's just no way that it could happen. And I just find that to be so arrogant, so ridiculously arrogant. Like, we haven't explored everything. We don't know everything that's going on. And to think that there's not the chance of an intelligent species out there that is able to keep themselves secret from us, that's just, to me, if the species is real, they've evolved in a way that's a lot different than the way we have evolved. And one of the ways that they've evolved is the ability to be invisible, basically, and to have us not know that they exist. It's not them infringing on our world when we have encounters with them. It's us accidentally stepping into theirs. And that, to me, is the truth, because as evolved as we are, I think they did the same exact thing evolution-wise, but they took it in a different way. I know I'm kind of going a little wacky on you there.
No, it's not wacky at all. I think they are perfectly primed to do what they do and where they do it. And when we go out there, we're just loud and bumbling and smelly, and they can hear us and smell us, and just they know we're coming a mile away, literally probably a mile away.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where I really feel like there will be a point where it's proven. And the scariest part will be that they're way more intelligent than we think they are. Like I've heard stories about their own language, about them having like specific watch outs, and they assign each other to have different watch outs so they can keep track of us. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot out there that we don't know. And I think that just saying that these guys there's just no way is a very ignorant thing to think, in my opinion.
Last couple questions here for you, Jeremy. I appreciate your time. So you did mention already that you, of course, walked that road again, because you have to, right? If you want to go and have a social life. I mean, did you, take a week off and say, hey guys, if you want to come see me, come on down the old Carnegie Bay Road, the opposite direction, because I'm not walking up, because that means I have to go back down when it's dark.
I think that for at least like a week, maybe probably not even a week, to be honest with you, but there was at least a few days where I modified my normal schedule so that I could walk home during light hours. So I was able to take my bike, or, so that it was light, or I found a ride, but that didn't last long. It might have been a week, might have been 2 weeks. But I went back to my normal ways. Yeah.
That's understandable. When we're that age, we're not as concerned with our mortality as we are now. So things are different now. Does your family still own that property?
Yes, the Slate still own at least some of the property. It was my grandparents, and then my dad and his two brothers, and I think that I think they're still. Of course, I don't live there, so I'm not a part of that part of the family business. But I do believe they still own it and are operating it.
Do you ever want to go back there and just take a midnight stroll for old time's sake down Carnegie Bay Road?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I think the last time I was there for my cousin's wedding, that I did take a stroll down it at night, just for old time's sake. And I also want to take my sons. I have 3 sons, and I haven't been able to get back there in quite a few years. And I would like to get back there so they could see my old stomping grounds and meet some of my old friends and family and stuff like that. And then it would be cool to maybe do a midnight walk with my boys. That'd be pretty funny.
Is there anybody there now that would talk to you about things that are going on, that are kind of in the know about, the woods are haunted, or it's Bigfoot, or whatever they want to label it? Do you hear any whispers of that still going on there?
I haven't. But I could reach out and talk to, I have an aunt. Well, I have an aunt and an uncle. They don't walk home from anywhere, but and then I have a cousin that is a I don't know, a decade younger than me, maybe 12 years younger than me. So he might have an update. I haven't talked to him in quite a few years, so I could ask him about it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'm just kind of curious because I looked it up on the maps, and holy cow, that must be a beautiful area, being right on the water like that, and just woods everywhere. I bet that's a beautiful location. But Jeremy, did we cover everything? Was there any last thoughts or things that you wanted to say, or something that I didn't cover with you?
No, I think we covered everything. I was very humbled to be a part of your show. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and this was great.
No way. I'm humbled that you wanted to come on and chat with me today. I appreciate that.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little biography. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. said in his poem, The Four Quartets, where he says, when you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.